May the wisdom of Puretide be with us, the cunning of Shadow Sun, for we need it. Have we not endured enough already? I recall the Kerata since it all began. A Bentusi flotilla was passing and warned us of the first danger, the Begale. The bellicose ones, green, angry, belligerent. They will never know the light of the greater good. They came in their meteor. It slammed into our planet and laid its lush gardens, its rolling prairies, mostly waste. Yet somehow, impossibly, millions of the Begales survived the impact, and then they poured from the crash site like a tsunami of rage and hate. We fought them long, and we fought them hard, fought them for our world. But that was just the beginning. For while the Begale still roamed our planet's surface, our very skies darkened, and the Yehe, the ever-devouring, started to fall out of the skies as numerous as drops of rain. I stand behind our tide wall shield line. The drone ports, the gun rigs reach as far as the eye can see. It has been Rota since our last contact with either. The Begale had tried to take this city so many times, but each time we beat them back. The massed fire from our KV-128s, the Storm Surgers, destroyed their vehicles before they got near. Our gun rigs and drones did much to slow them, to punish their hordes. We've dropped the protective fields of the shear line, and our ranked lines of fire warriors fired, then raised them again. Down, fire, up again. Down, fire, up again. Sometimes when they finally withdrew, there were mounds of them. I will never understand them, their sheer rage. How they were willing to keep charging at our lines of ordered fire, no matter how many of them we killed, no matter how little they actually did to us. It is, utterly insane. They value no other life, as so many of the beings we have encountered in a galaxy we now know to be so dark and terrible. This had gone on for nearly half a cycle all across our world. But the Begale seem not to value even their own lives. For with each wave, I saw that they were getting closer. And one day I knew that there would be more green-skinned lunatics attacking us than our lines could annihilate. And on that day I feared that they would simply wash over us and sweep us all away in carnage and blood. Perhaps that would have happened soon, but then, as I said, the skies darkened. The monsters from the void, the Yehe, who the Gwaela called the Tyranids, a Gevasa once told me. They landed all over our world, but we had the firepower to keep them from landing in our major conurbations. Hence they were forced to compete with the Begale, outside in the wastes and valleys, and what remained of the forests. We didn't really know what was happening. Our shields and firepower cleansed the skies whenever the monsters attacked, either of them. But any of our attempts to send out scouting craft, either by land or by air, they met the same fate. We never saw them again. So we just held, and waited, and worried. The Korvatra, our navy, could be on its way, could be here at any time. So all we could do was sit behind our walls and turrets and wait. Wait for deliverance. There was no way of knowing what would happen next. No tactic we could have employed, no preparations we could have made. The worst of it? The thing I will never forget if I lived through this. I know it will haunt me to the end of my days. Their laughter. The way they seemed to love it so much. They were actually happy when the horror got worse. The green ones. The Begel are mad. The dawn was bright, yet there was no warmth. Our world was colder, now that the dust from the impact had choked much of our atmosphere since the meteor hit. Today was especially cold, especially overcast. The ash was like snow, languidly drifting down on us all that day. We stood, being slowly dusted with it. Rank on rank of us, as always, stood behind the tired wall shield lines. We could well be the last of our kind on the planet. We could not tell. The interference in the atmosphere could have choked our communications as it did our breathing. But I am FireClan. I know how to fight. I do not know the technicalities of these things. Perhaps we were all that remained. Perhaps not. But it made no difference. Not today. None could help us. We knew that they were coming. We could hear them. We could see the wake of dust and ash that they threw up as they approached. Roaring buggies, makeshift trucks and tanks, and odd stomping parodies of battlesuits that belched their own ash and soot into the air. And the same affray as we had fought a score of times began again. But there were more of them. Many, many more of them. My fears played out before my eyes. As always, they just charged. Our gun rigs fired. Our KV-128s, the storm surgers, fired. Huge plumes of flame and smoke went up from their vehicles. Lines of the Begel fell and joined the carpet of them up to the approach. Yet on they charged. When they came within range, our tired wall shield lines went down, and we fired, then went up to block their return fire. We had performed the same route, the same drill as before, but I could see it was not the same this time. As organized as we were, as accurate as we were, as calm as we were, there was no escaping the truth. There were too many of them. Trucks and their battlesuit parodies eventually reached our lines, careening out of control or suicidally slamming into the struts. But across the entire front, they managed to break, shoot, destroy, or demolish our tide wall lines. The shields fell. Still we stood. We fired in lines upon lines of them. The 3-line stand was used, and we knelt, stood, and lay, and firing all we could, but not able to waste even one shot. So many were they. Even then, I think we could have held them. Maybe. But that is when the horror came in earnest. For the ground rumbled, and we had thought it was merely from the amount of Begel, their massive war machines all trampling towards us, their cadence enough to make the ground shake. But it was not. In 3 sectors simultaneously, the ground erupted. I was only 50 paces from where one came up. It was like the Begel had used their mad magicians to make the earth attack us. We had seen stranger things from them. The huge green feet smashing down on segments of our lines, only to be filled immediately by our reserves. But it was not. For the eruptions of earth had things in their midst. A huge Yehe in each. Its mighty maws, its incredible jaws, came up and entire teams disappeared into them. But they simply did not submerge back into the ground. They slithered out, towering over our units, using their mighty tails to smash aside our battlesuits. They moved so fast. Our lines folded, as we could not all fire at the Begel, but had to fire at the huge monsters in our midst. It was as if the Begel and Yehe had made common cause, because the Begel cheered at the arrival of the things. My mind rebelling, I looked around to see our demise. I kept firing, but they were still so thick I could not miss. It was then that I saw. There were many other things coming out all around the battlefield. The huge-mouthed ones, yes, but others, equally towering, but smaller mouths, more powerful in their mighty claws, more things coming out of them to kill and slay. They were equally terrible, but left cavernous holes that our units and the Begel fell into, but none came out. What did come out were hordes unending of the Yehe, the Tyranids. The smaller ones, with hands that fired worms that bored into your flesh, the ones of teeth and fang that ripped all apart, with their scything talons and rending claws. We fell back again and again. The Begel and Yehe were not working together. They fell on each other and ignored us as we drew back. This is how I can make this report, how I can make this recording. For as we stand behind the last line of our shield walls, before me is a scene from a waking hell. Green-skinned Begel charge around the battlefield that was once our outer defensive grounds. They rush towards the Yehe, with joy, abandon, a bellowed laugh carrying out of them. They are enjoying this. How? The Yehe are tearing them to pieces, but one on either side falls to the hands or teeth, claws or choppers of the other. I cannot look away. And I know when either of them, or both of them, or the ones that win this bloodbath as we now stand and watch, when they turn their eyes on us again, I am not sure we can stop them. But then, at the rate they are slaughtering each other, there may not actually be any need. Kovatra, where are you? Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the important forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we are to again look at some of the larger warrior beasts of the Tyranid hive fleets, the Mawloc and the Trygon. Both are what are classified as part of the family of Tyranids called subterranean swarms, for despite their impressive size, both are burrowing creatures, as I hope I've reflected in my little flavour tale at the start. They add a level of strategic and tactical versatility and threat that truly makes the Tyranids a horror to confront. For these warrior beasts are large, lethal, and nigh on impossible to pen in or predict. No land-based force can ignore them, fewer still can defeat them, or even survive their advent. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, Mawlocs. Mawlocs are huge, worm-like creatures with great distended jaws. They are the tunneling outriders to the Tyranid swarm, and burrow deep beneath the ground to bypass a prey world's frontline defenses. Once past the outer perimeter, a Mawloc bursts forth in a shower of dirt and stone, swallowing any foes unfortunate enough to be standing where it emerges. The Mawloc then runs rampant among the reeling enemy, wreaking as much havoc and carnage as it can with its over-muscled tail before vanishing back below ground once more. Severe tremors are the only warning of a Mawloc attack, making sentry duty on a seismically active world a particularly harrowing experience for the defenders should a hive fleet enter the system. Physically, a Mawloc is an incredibly simple Tyranid bioform, with little concession given to other roles. Its 6 clawed limbs are comparatively small, and whilst they lack the reach to be especially efficient in combat, they are nonetheless incredibly powerful, employed to gain extra traction whilst burrowing and haul the Mawloc through its tunnels. This should not be taken to mean a Mawloc is defenseless. Nothing could be further from the truth. A Mawloc's massive razor-toothed maw is the entryway to an equally cavernous gullet. Most of the creature's victims are swallowed whole, there to be painfully digested over the course of several days. Should an item of prey prove large enough to stick in the Mawloc's craw, they are first pounded flat by a battery of blows from the weapon's muscular tail before being devoured. A Mawloc is almost entirely blind and relies on information provided by a series of pressure-sensitive organs that run the length of its flanks. These can absorb and decipher pressure waves, creating a many-layered picture of the world around the Mawloc. It is this ability that allows the creature to hunt its prey even whilst burrowing through the ground. Even the slightest tremor above ground grants a hunting Mawloc a wealth of information, enabling it to intercept a quarry with frightening speed and unerring accuracy. The more regular and rhythmic the sound, the more likely it is that a Mawloc will be able to hone in on the source. The pounding thump of a terrifying heartbeat is like a flaring beacon to a Mawloc. Thus it is the victim's own fear that betrays their whereabouts and brings their destruction. End quote. Now the Mawloc is an amazing model. I really should get some for my own Lidzilla army, but I digress. What this nightmare creature does always reminds me of the sandworms of Arrakis, of Frank Herbert's Dune. But then, it would. For the universe of Dune is one of the many settings that Warhammer 40k draws on in so many ways. Now some may say that this is a bad thing, but as I stated before, I actually think this is one of the strengths of the grim darkness of the far future, because it captures what is best around, and by absorbing it, the whole becomes stronger, more rich and deep. But also so many fandoms can migrate directly to the grimdark and find so much that is so familiar, and yet made fresh and new again within this mighty smelting pot of the genres. The Navigators and their guilds in Dune are clearly the inspiration for the Novus Nobilitae, mutated humans fundamental to all travel, but where the Navigators of Dune take space to mutate and then to fold space between one place and another. The Navigators of the Grimdark, going one step further of course, then lead the ships of the Imperium through literal hell to get from one place to another. The oppressive, stagnant suffocation of the Imperium of Warhammer is also clearly inspired by that of Dune, and its Byzantine politics and aged decaying houses. The terror of artificial intelligence and the Butlerian jihad in Dune are equally paralleled in the Age of Strife and the AI rebellion in Warhammer. Its mentats being the template for the Mechanicum to a certain extent, and the grimmer, darker version of the same premise, the Servitors. Paul Atreides, Muad'Dib, could very realistically be seen as a template for the Emperor of Mankind. The Sardaukar, especially, being the templates for the Space Marines as well. The Fremen and Sardaukar being the continued template for the Marines comes from the harsh terrain of death worlds, mimicking the harshness of the life of the people to make them the top-tier warriors. For if you can survive on a death world, then you are clearly made of sterner stuff than the rest of humanity. And so the imagery and effect of the Mawloc mimics the same feeling and threat of the sandworms of Dune, but to a much diminished size, of course. I cannot imagine how much Forge World would charge for a Mawloc the size of a sandworm. From beneath you it consumes, a terrifying proposition for any army. As no ground you pick can be safe from them. To be gobbled up with no chance of glory, stoic defense, or a fighting chance at survival, even if one is tenacious enough. No. One moment you are standing safe, the next you are in a Tyranid's belly being digested over days of agonizing pain. But back to Warhammer again being a smelting pot. The very name itself, the Mawloc, is only a different smelling to that used by H.G. Wells for his dark denizens in the Time Machine, the subterranean horrors that stalked the future. But what of the Trygon? To quote, Trygons. The Trygon is a vast serpentine creature, so colossal that it towers over even the mighty Carnifex. It is a heavily armoured monster, covered from head to tail with a thick carapace of shifting plates. As the Trygon moves, these plates generate a potent biostatic charge that courses along the length of the beast's body and wreathes its bladed forelimbs with crackling power. The Trygon can direct this energy as a lethal high-voltage discharge, unleashing pulsing arcs of lightning that leave its prey as little more than a charred pile of scorched bones. A Trygon's claws are not only fearsome in combat, they also allow it to burrow through practically any material. When a Trygon detects an enemy above, it digs upwards, bursting through the ground with explosive force, its huge blade limbs scything through warriors and tanks alike. Such subterranean attacks are hard to detect and harder to defend against, especially on worlds with background seismic activity. Once the beast emerges, only focused heavy weapons fire can be relied upon to bring it down. For the Trygon's iron-hard carapace is a proof against all else. Trygons excavate a massive network of underground tunnels as they burrow beneath the surface of a prey world. Other Tyranid creatures use the passageways left in the Trygon's wake, scuttling unseen as battle rages overhead. The emergence of a tunneling Trygon, therefore, often heralds a larger Tyranid attack, with hordes of creatures pouring out of the tunnel shortly after its emergence. Trygon primes. As with many Tyranid organisms, different Trygons display substantial variety. One of the most distinct is the Trygon prime. These beasts have elongated jaws and ceramite spines running the length of their sinuous bodies, to better harness and direct their bioelectric discharges. More dangerous still, these Trygons share a strong synaptic link with the hive mind, and are able to dominate the will of lesser Tyranid creatures. End quote. Now the Trygon is as staggering and startling in its arrival, but it is probably the biggest threat. Trust me, I know. I have one, and have faced them many a time. For they come up and can bring a myriad of little friends with them. Now I love this part particularly, as it brings a whole new level of confusion to a battlefield. It makes the NIDs less predictable, as you do not only have to remove the threats you can see, but you also have to factor for the threats you cannot see. Those that come from beneath. When a Trygon pops up and brings packs of either gene stealers or devil gaunts with it, the battlefield feels chaotic, fast-paced, frantic, unpredictable. It always reminds me of Starship Troopers, the film, not just in the imagery, but in the sheer pandemonium that is going on. And that is why I adore fighting them, as much as owning or playing with them myself. The strong imagery, the marvelous models, the cinematic feel, and the utter hilarity of it all. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to Mawlocs and Trygons. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon, or giving the video a share if that is beyond your present scope. It would be a great boon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.